Good afternoon and welcome back. A very, very warm welcome to you all. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, as you know, it's in Dubai. COP28 is in full session, and in fact, most of us have just come from there. So we're all a bit copped out, as we say. So it's great to be here with you all in Hong Kong. I'm Eithne, Treanor. I'm going to be your moderator for this session. We're going to be looking at climate tech after COP, and really examining what we need to do when it comes to technology, how it's absolutely driving everything we do when it comes to the energy transition, and indeed when it comes to building the energy of the future. Let me introduce you to my dear panel now. We have here Professor Andy Yoon. Delighted to have you here with us, and we're so happy to have you, the CEO of Xpeng. Thank you so much. Alex Yang is with us too, the co-founder and CEO of Tua Smart. Also, we're delighted to be joined by Poman Low, the founder and managing director of AlphaTrio Capital. Dr. Brian Gu joins us, vice president and president of Xpeng, vice chairman and president, and from Aramco, Saudi Aramco, executive vice president, technology and innovation, Ahmad Al-Khowaiter. So what a fabulous panel we have, and as you can imagine, they have all the answers. And if not, they're exploring, let's say. They're well on their way. Ahmad, let me start with you. Sure. And really, you know, when we look at the shift in energy focus over the year, I suppose let's look perhaps at the bigger picture, really, and the response also from traditional, you know, hydrocarbon companies, because companies have had to change. The whole thinking has had to change, and how we look at energy around the world, that has had to change. So give us a feel for what's going on out there.
Thank you, Eithne. Great to be here in Hong Kong again. So I'd like to just frame the energy system, just for people who are not, you know, pretty much in the business. Good to understand, you know, the scale of this system. So most of you are familiar with oil, for example, or coal, but just to get an understanding of the scale, the world produces about roughly 100 million barrels a day of oil. But that's not all we do as an energy system. That only represents 25 to 30% of the energy system. The energy system is more like 300 million barrels a day equivalent. That's oil, gas, coal, nuclear, hydro, and some renewables. So to understand that scale, about 80% is that fossil fuel part, basically oil, gas, and coal. And the rest is nuclear and hydro and some renewables. So to get an idea of the challenge we face, we need to understand that 80% has been pretty much constant for the last 20 years. It hasn't come down. Even though the world has really ramped up the use of renewables, we're still only at 2% renewables in terms of the new renewables. That's solar and wind. And that's because the world needs energy. It keeps growing. So even though we're producing so much renewables, we're barely catching up with the demand for the energy. And a lot of that energy was needed for growth. Much of that happened here in China. We saw much of that growth that's happened over the last 20 years has been in China, which really undergirded the quick economic growth in the region, which took people out of poverty and created higher quality of life. So we need to maintain that growth globally. It's not just China. We have India, we have the Middle East, we have Africa, we have South America. They all want to have that growth as well. And that's going to take more energy. How do we meet that challenge? How do we keep supplying reliable, secure energy for the growth and the economic well-being of the world? How do we make sure it's reliable and affordable? Affordable is a big challenge for that part of the world. And finally, how do we make sure it's sustainable, it's low emissions? And just that gives you kind of the idea of why we have this big challenge facing us. And the solution, we believe, is really technology, because we don't have all the technology solutions yet. Solar and wind, they address electricity. Electricity is only 20% of that primary energy mix I talked about. In order to go beyond that 20%, we need battery energy storage. We need storage. And that needs more work, more technology to bring it, to make it affordable. For the stuff that doesn't use electrons, that 80%, we need alternatives that give us the same value for example, in chemical energy, in the form of, for example, reduction of steel, concrete, aviation, which is a form of transport, but actually is a very hard to decarbonize sector. Those hard to decarbonize sectors can't use electrons directly. So we need alternatives, and that's things like carbon capture and sequestration, so we can actually capture and where it's available, where it's geologically available, hydrogen, and energy storage. So I'll leave it there, and that's the challenge.
But you're so right. I mean, the scope of the energy, issue is just it's huge, and I think we all need to be looking at making sure that this energy transition happens, but not at the expense of growth and not at the expense of development for people around the world. I think we have to. There's so much. We have to have a much more holistic approach. Dr. Gu, when we look at transportation. Really, the IEA is saying right now that, road transportation is about 1/6 of global emissions. And we just look around us, in traffic, and most of us have cars. So what do we do in terms of really bringing on board smart mobility, electric vehicles? How do we move from the hardware sort of that we're so familiar with to perhaps software?
Well, it's a very good question. First of all, thank you for inviting me to speak here. But I want to share the smart mobility is not just about energy, right? Because obviously, being a battery electric car, it's a zero emission. There is a sustainable sort of energy impact. However, I think the energy is only one component of that whole life cycle impact. If you look at smart mobility, the first compared to traditional ICEs, electric vehicle will have a smaller carbon footprint. We actually did a study on Xpeng's own delivery in 2022. If you look at the vehicles we delivered to the market, those vehicles over the life cycle, actually it reduces carbon footprint by 1.72 million metric tons of carbon, which is equivalent to about 90 million trees planted. So that is the energy impact on the sustainability. However, I think what the point people overlooked is actually what the technology AI has been actually doing to sustainability as well as emission. For example, in China right now, we start to see the rise of smart mobility. Highly capable ADAS functions or autonomous driving technologies become more and more popular in daily vehicles. And we actually done studies, alongside with McKinsey, look at autonomous driving technology actually can also reduce emission overall to the mobility sector. At the same time, it reduces congestion, it reduces accident rates, etc. So those impacts actually have not really factored into this environmental impact. So if you take it together, I think the software component in the smart mobility side is actually probably be more and more dramatic as we actually develop further and better technologies in people's daily driving behaviors.
And again, I think even looking at that, it is about taking that whole holistic approach to everything we do, even road transportation. It's without a doubt. Poman, let's talk at impact investing and just really look at we're at the race against time. I think everybody almost agrees with that, and there's so much needs to be done, and it's urgent. But how can we bridge that gap with impact investing, particularly in Asia?
Well, I think first is awareness, and I'm just really glad that, at FII Priority, that we have this panel dedicated to climate tech impact investing, because really climate change is not a theoretical construct. It's happening here and now, and we are racing against time. And in Asia, this is where the highest growth is, obviously. We do account for 2/3 of the world's population, and arguably probably 2/3 of the emissions as well. And yet, of all the AUM dedicated to impact investing, and that's over 1 trillion, only 17% comes from Asia. So we're obviously lagging behind. But I'm hopeful. I think with all this rising awareness, we obviously know that we need to address it as a priority issue. Otherwise, I think the 1.5 limit will not be met, and that will result in catastrophic consequences, irreversible damage. So we have to act here and now. And Asia, obviously, is a big part of the picture. We definitely need to foster collaboration and also partnerships, because I'm so glad to hear the word holistic. Sustainability is definitely an interconnected issue that requires PPP partnerships, because nothing can be solved in isolation. And we need a spectrum of capital to address all the needs, ranging from green bonds to green tech investing, to blended finance projects, to also projects that do need philanthropy. And I think that we definitely need a number of funds to address this gap. And that is why I've actually founded a green tech fund named AlphaTrio with a mission to empower the next generation of green tech companies to solve this challenge.
And again, that new way of looking at things, but being open to so many different ways, I think that's also more important than everything else, because there's so much that, we have to, just take a chance on some new funding, new everything. Alex, talk to me a little bit about when we look at, what's new, what practical technology is out there, what's working, because ultimately we're trying to build this interoperable world, really, I suppose, and deliver synergies. So how are we going to do this?
I think the most excitement will come from that where we try to integrate different type of technology together, like the IoT, Internet of Things, plus with AI, plus with the new material technology. So we create a perfect closed data loop that turn this world into a sensible, analyzable, and controllable world. So with the new material technology and connectivities, so we'll be able to collecting all the data among different type of devices and from different type of space. Like in this room, with the new infrared technology, we'll be able to tell that how many people in this room, where they are they far from the stage, close to the stage? And then we'll be able to do the analysis to see that, okay, who are the guys on the stage? Okay, are those guys comfortable right now? Should we heat it up or should we light it up? And how far are the audience out there? So what will be the right luminance we put on the lights to make them look good, but they can look very comfortable. And then through the controllables, we'll be able to interact with the device, with all different type of devices in this room. So turn this physical world not only into a digital twin, but it's a controllable digital twin that you'll be able to interact with all the physical things in a different way.
See, so where were you this morning when it was really cold in that audience? And we could have done with you could have been measured and monitored to know that we needed just a little less temperature. But thank you.
Correct.
But again, it really is. It's so exciting, I think, at the moment, the disruption that's happening, but it's going to make such a difference, I think. Professor Andy, please, if I can, for you, whether it's after COP28, we still have another week, but it is happening at the moment, and I think we need to look at it. The energy transition. Where do you see the primary source of energy for a really sustainable future? And I think I know what you're going to say.
Yes, I think that hydrogen is future energy. It's right. It's exactly I agree that the hydrogen is future energy, but hydrogen is the H2. That is not a science fiction and ideal energy sources. The most people knows that the sun is powered by the H2 hydrogen, but that's a problem. The sun is the sun. The most people that is not the human scale. The problem is that there is various forms of the hydrogen. That is a lot of things. That is methanol and then ethanol and then the propane and then butane like that, and also the ammonia also is that one. But I think that the most reliable and efficient and the human scale, the energy source is the methanol, because that is a very safety and very sustainable energy sources.
We'll talk more in detail about that. Ahmad, let me come back to you. I mean, while, Professor looks after hydrogen, and that's his focus, you have to do hydrogen and hydrocarbons and CCSU, and you have to do renewables, and you have the whole lot to look after. Yeah. But also you mentioned, I wanted to come back to, Dr. Brian was talking about AI. AI and sustainability, how does that come together, and how do you think it's going to help us?
Okay, so
just quickly touch on that, and then I'll come down to...
on AI, I mean, everybody's seen the AI revolution, and many have predicted that this is actually the AI age, that we've left the industrial age, the information age, and now this is the AI age. And that's how impactful and how that we believe it's going to be. It is going to change everything we are doing, not only in business, but in industry, in science, in health and education. And so we already see the beginnings of that in our work. We are seeing the application of AI on sustainability in the form of, for example, efficiency, improving efficiency by utilizing all the data to be able to optimize our energy production and reduce our waste and reduce carbon footprints, but also more interesting in my mind in the long term is applying AI to discovery, to research, basic research, fundamental research, which can have a disruptive impact on our whole system and our whole energy system. Already we're seeing the acceleration of discovery utilizing AI, and we're just scratching the surface in our research labs. Many groups around the world are already seeing that value. So I could think that we're actually going to accelerate the scientific process tremendously in the next 50 years. And this is going to create many of those miracles we've seen in the last 100 years in a much shorter time span.
When I come back, I have a few other things I need to talk to you about, but I just thought I wanted to hear your viewpoint on that. Dr. Gu, if I can, we look at the auto industry particularly. This is your space, but also look at general manufacturing and those hard-to-abate industries, without a doubt. Smart factories are becoming a buzzword, and I know we're seeing this in China as well. But how important is it for industry, I suppose the manufacturing of your cars and that Industry 4.0 can actually help reduce emissions?
Well, I think for the auto industry, being AI-driven, digital-driven, as well automation-driven is very important because right now I think the technology that actually empowers both the manufacturing side as well as the R&D side is making work significantly more efficient and also more environmental friendly. Just on the R&D front, let's say, just echoing the previous point on AI, it is also having a very significant impact on the efficiency that we're doing, for example, autonomous driving research. In the past, people all know that you have hundreds of vehicles you have to be on the road to test for the autonomous driving. Now with AI, we actually were one of the first one to use transformer network as well as the BEV architecture to do large computing simulations instead of physical testing. So it actually saves a lot of significant, in terms of environmental impact and footprint as well. On the manufacturing side, what we're seeing is that moving towards a more integrated, large-scale, for example, die-cast stamping for automobile manufacturing. In the past, you make a lot of small pieces and you weld it together, and it's a much more laborsome, much more costly, as well as inefficient process. Now we actually are bringing all these together into one large stamping integrated, but powered by software, by digitalization and automation. What it does, it reduces the amount of material use, it reduces the time of manufacturing, it lightens the weight of your vehicle, so make it overall process more efficient, and utilization also saves energy as well. So all these technologies that you are starting to seeing in automotive industry, but at the same time also permeating in all aspects of our work.
Alex, if I may talk to you and bring you in on this one first. Let's look at the economics. I mean, it all comes down to the economics at the end. And again, really creating that new demand. And how do we get capital? And it's huge amounts of capital that we need in here, and the resources to really build the energy capacity.
I think a very interesting turning point in the past 2 years is that I think in the beginning, sustainability will be, for most of the end users, will be more like the ethical good versus like the economical beneficial.
Okay.
And I think that since last year, I think that while we have the kind of a global energy crisis that turned this mindset of most of the end users into another one, is that they already see the economic, good, from the sustainability. So like take South Europe, for example, for last year, their average electricity price raises 3 to 4 times in the South Europe. And the majority of the, no matter is end user enterprises, seeing that so the electricity become more and more unaffordable. So what they can do with this? So they're trying to looking for the solutions, no matter it's for the new energy storage, the decentralized, that's self-generated power like the solar, so etc. So the total revenue about the major residential energy storage company, maybe top 10 of them, they get the 4 to 6 times growth in last year, and which will attract maybe 3 times extra capital for that, and also attract most of the talent and all the related enterprises from the industry to get in. I think that type of end user demand will be a very good hinge to attract all those kind of capital and talent out there. Versus in the past, the majority will be a big portion of the capital will come from the NGOs like the government, like the university. I think that will be a very good part.
The end user, again, we've heard a lot about the end user and putting people at the very heart of this energy transition and really looking at it. And Poman, I know you talk a lot about purpose-driven investment. But when we look at purpose-driven investment, how do we make sure that that's what's on the minds of investors? They're looking for return on investment. They need to make sure they're putting their money where there will be return. How are we going to shift that concept?
Well, purpose-driven investments have to be sustainable, which means they have to not just drive impact, but also financial returns. So I see that sustainability is obviously the defining challenge of our century, but it's also the biggest trillion-dollar opportunity. We have almost 100 countries committing to net zero. We have 80% of Fortune 500, I think it will be close to 100, making some sort of climate pledge. And the only way we can drive this transition is by leveraging on technology. Technology has obviously disrupted each and every facet of our lives, but it can also turn these risks into opportunities. And I'm very glad to have seen it in action. So actually 13 years ago, I launched the first carbon neutral hotel in Hong Kong called iClub. And since then, we've been investing a lot in impact ventures. And I would say with great success, because we see that those that deliver impact actually outperform the rest of the portfolio. So it means that these companies are successful because of the impact they deliver.
So it's getting easier, convince people.
Definitely. So we see that all the stars are aligned. The next wave of unicorns will be green tech companies that actually help us solve existential challenges. And I'm particularly excited about prop tech because actually in Asia, where it's very dense and humid, half of the emissions actually are buildings associated. So there's huge demand for prop tech to help us decarbonize our buildings, and all the banks are keen to work on sustainable finance. So the developers have all the reasons to pay for these solutions. And secondly, clean tech, obviously, all the game-changing clean energy solutions out there, also water treatment solutions and carbon capture solutions. And obviously AI really helps with energy efficiency, with climate modeling. And lastly, I'm very also excited about agriculture and food tech because we actually have to grow 68% more food to feed the world. And precision farming with AI, with big data, is the only way that we can actually save lives.
And again, I think the leadership in that sector, the momentum is there. Yes. So it's really about keeping that moving forward. Professor, I know you talk a lot about human-scale hydrogen energy. Talk to me a little bit about that. I mean, methanol in terms of advantages, where we are at that right now, and why you think that's such a good way to go.
Yes, just I'm here to talking about methanol and hydrogen. Most of people focus only the hydrogen, but the hydrogen is very dangerous. You know that. Most of people don't know that. Hydrogen, you think that what? And there's a hydrogen bomb. But the hydrogen bomb is why? Because the hydrogen needs using hydrogen the gases that is high compressure. That is 1,000 bars. It's LPG stand is 100 times the high pressure. And that needs to be low cryogenic temperature, minus 253 the Celsius. So that's why this is very dangerous. And that's why the hydrogen needs a very low density, even that. So on the other hand, the methanol is very safety. That is liquid status in the room temperature, and then very easy to handling, and very high density than the hydrogen itself. So most importantly, that is the methanol is very environmental friendly, and then the carbon neutral. So methanol is very safety and then very environmental friendly energy source than the hydrogen.
Again, I can't resist on this one. Hydrogen comes back to you, Ahmad. There's some incredible work going on in Saudi Arabia, and we heard a lot about NEOM this morning, and of course you've got the big green hydrogen happening there. But put it into perspective in terms of what work you're doing in hydrogen with Saudi Aramco.
So I'd like to just take a little bigger picture and say, okay, well, the challenge is really technology and how to get that technology. And I just want to carry over a little bit from the venture aspect. So we actually invest tremendously in technology in both in our R&D, which is upwards of $800 million a year, 60% of which goes toward these types of technologies: sustainability, hydrogen, carbon capture. These are the technologies we do in our own labs in R&D, and we commercialize and scale those technologies. But we also are big investors in venture capital because that is the way to get to the market. And we see that that's the bigger challenge, actually, is getting to the market. The problem is, it's not just a technology problem, it's also a market problem. Markets are not designed to pay a higher price for energy than the existing technology. So that's why we really need to work with governments to make these markets happen. And so we have a $3.5 billion venture fund on early stage technologies, deep tech, 1.5 billion of which is dedicated, we announced last year, on sustainability technologies, exactly like hydrogen, carbon capture, battery technologies. We're a very active investor in technologies such as these. We've been a leading investor in energy in general, but in sustainability recently, the last 5 years. Many of those technologies we actually scale up, and that's the challenge, is scaling up energy. If you remember the last energy venture boom in the early 2000s, it really failed because of lack of scale up. It's far too large of an investment for a startup to be able to scale up energy technologies, and that's why you need strategic investments with large energy players. The energy players have to be part of the solution. Otherwise, these technologies will not go very far. They will not scale. And so we are scaling very large projects. Hydrogen, for example. We shipped the first low-carbon hydrogen shipment back in 2020 from Saudi Arabia to Japan. Nobody had done that before. We converted to ammonia, low-carbon ammonia, and shipped 20 tons at that time. We then subsequently sent commercial volumes, thousands of tons, to Japan and Korea. That's the way you make a market. You have to invest at large scale. And that's what I think is the bigger challenge facing technology today. We are in the process of establishing one of the world's largest, as you heard from NEOM, the world's largest green hydrogen, but also in the eastern coasts, Aramco is leading the development of the world's largest blue hydrogen hub, which is about 10 times larger than the green hydrogen hub. So by 2030, once markets are available, the challenge is really how do we get off-takers at the higher prices? That needs government support. And we're working on it. We already are developing those projects. In addition, we're doing carbon capture at scale. We're developing today the world's largest carbon capture and sequestration project. It's 9 million tons a year of CO2 from industry, and that will be running by 2027. We already awarded engineering, and we hope to award construction soon. So we are putting our money into this because that's what it's going to take. It's going to take a lot of effort and a lot of investment, but it's also going to take a lot of market development. And that's where I think the big challenge is. One of the things that we always hear is hydrogen, low-carbon hydrogen is too expensive. And if you look at the IRA in the US, $3 a kilogram, it does sound very expensive compared. That's $30 a million BTU in natural gas language. So that's a lot of money of support, given that you can buy natural gas today at maybe $10 a million BTU. However, if you compare it to the solar revolution, that $3 per kilogram, that kilogram contains about 40 kilowatt hours. So you're paying basically 7 cents a kilowatt hour. If you compare that to the feed-in tariffs governments paid for years and years, it is at the low end of feed-in tariffs for electricity. So if we're really serious about decarbonizing the hard-to-decarbonize sectors, governments have to get serious about incentives for scaling the technology to get the cost down. So I think we need to put things in perspective. We're willing on one technology, but we're not willing on another technology, and that's the challenge I feel most. We are not technology agnostic. We want to pick our winners. Well, we're going to end up with continuing rising emissions if we do that.
Poman, I see you, watching this and maybe wishing we had Saudi Aramco's scale and sort of energy to do this. But again, how do we encourage some of the smaller players that want to come into this business, the startups, and not just with capital, but again, connections, market opportunities, all of that? What needs to be done?
What we need to do is build a robust ecosystem that can connect these startups with not just capital, but a lot of the resources and connections, because they need to scale. Otherwise, they will not be the winners that you mentioned. So that's why I think funds are very important. We don't need just one party to invest. We need all parties to work in collaboration so that they can fine-tune their business models. So for example, in the past, I used to just invest using our own balance sheet. But now with this fund, we have lots of LPs that will also contribute their expertise, and they can be the ones to actually test out these solutions, and whether their own operation guys are willing to pay, and whether it's actually helping to decarbonize. I think that's more powerful than any type of due diligence you can do on paper. And again, I think knowledge transfer is also very important. We need to work across borders so that we can actually pick the best of the best cutting-edge solutions and help them scale.
Do you want to come in on this, Alex, in terms of being able to scale up the smaller players and the startups?
Yeah, I think that's a very good topic. Like you mentioned, as right now, I think for most of the funds, that's things have become more and more competitive, because all the good companies and good teams, they're not looking for money looking for them, right? So the key part is what other values they can create for them, no matter it's your networks, no matter it's your market, your insights, and your talents, whatever it is. I think it's the same way that how we grow this company in past 10 years, and become the New York and Hong Kong dual-listed company, is that we have very good shareholders, investors helping us in all other perspectives other than financial. And financial will be the least part that we're looking for then.
Brian, talk to me about government support and incentives here. What's happening in this region, and again, how can that work to actually move this and really escalate it, because that's what has to happen.
Well, I think whenever you have try to catalyze a megatrend in the beginning, I think government's role is very important, because in the beginning you have an undersized sort of industry. The cost is not really, I would say, practical for use. At the same time, encouraging these user behavior also takes time. That's why, for example, for electric vehicle industry, when the penetration is low, government subsidy plays actually quite big role in terms of encouraging people to use and buy EV. However, when the penetration, for example, reached current stage over 30%, government does not need to provide the subsidy anymore, because then the natural demand takes over. So again, the government's support at a critical junction is necessary to encourage the transition. At the same time, I think government has to play also a role to make sure there's sufficient infrastructure for the use of EV, for example, the charging stations. Obviously, the private network is also building at the same time, but the government will have to build in areas that private networks doesn't find economical. So I think that the collaborative effort between the private capital and the government capital is very, very important in terms of interplaying. And then lastly is actually the regulatory framework to really allow the new technologies, the new behaviors to take ground. Even for autonomous driving, you saw in China today is that now you start to see blueprints provided by the government to encourage use of level 2, level 3, or even level 4 scenarios to be on the ground. So to me, is actually the most important
and
part.
There's so much here, and our time is running away. This conversation is it's so good. Dr. Yoon, we have to start wrapping this up. Again, the most important thing that we need to be looking at right now, I think building sustainability into this, building, what's your call to action, so to speak, to, the industry out there? What do we need to do that's very urgent, and what we can do?
I think that is the electrification is very important.
Absolutely.
But renewable energy some problems. That is the problems are intermittent and then unreliable. That is we cannot believe that. You know that as a solar can generate in the night, only generate in the daytime. Wind is also. So I think the reliability of renewable energy is a problem that is cannot storing, and then cannot the distribution in the right way, and then so transformation is impossible. So the how is makes it possible? and that is power to X, and then to change it to the form of the hydrogen, the very safety hydrogen. That is the methanol. So solution is the transforms to the methanol. There's a power to X. That is transform to the methanol is very inefficient at the beginning, but okay. Yeah, and then there is safety, and then at the beginning time, but it's ultimately it's a safety and a very good energy sources.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's a long 30 seconds, so I'm squeezing the rest of you here. Forgive me. Please, Alex, just very quickly, quick call to action. What does the industry need to do?
I think it embraces the technology, looking for any type of great guys out there in different fields, and to find any way to interoperate with them and to cooperate with them. I think that's the way. Cross-border.
Poman, give us your words of wisdom, too, in terms of what impact investing.
Invest with purpose. We are the problem, but we can also be the solution. So let's drive the catalytic capital to empower the sustainable innovative solutions. And also, let's come together. Together, we can win the race and create impact for generations to come.
And Brian, give us a few words of wisdom to send us off.
Electrification is already here. Smartification is next. Autonomous driving for all.
Ahmad, I mean, for all of you, there was so much we didn't get to talk about, but the class closing word I need from you.
Well, I think we have to invest as a world in research and science and technology. We know that the challenges, we don't have the solutions yet. So I encourage, in taking risks, companies, industry, to take risks on technology. That's ventures and R&D. And I think governments have to step up and put more into R&D. It's not that easy of a challenge. People may believe that we have the solutions. We don't yet.
Thank you all so much. I really want to thank you for taking the time. Ahmad, Brian, thank you so much. Poman, Alex, and Professor Yoon, thank you all for your great insight, for sharing with us what's going on here. We have to leave it there, but again, wonderful conversation. And again, thank you all so much.